I'd become successful in real estate in my 20s. I saved my life growing up in this really dysfunctional household by being a problem solver. I don't think you have to be screwed up psychologically to end up in my case. It's very extreme. So I'm a businesswoman, mother, ceramic artist and activist, and recently an author. I live in Mallorca, and at the moment I'm on a mission to help other adult sufferers of child abuse. I returned to Sydney after an absence of 17 years in October last year for the amazing launch of my book at Birkeloff Bookshop, published by Gindera Press.
Hey, I'm Di Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. We're a platform that showcases and celebrates the strength, resilience, and achievement of women from all walks of life. I'm going to start today with just a brief trigger warning because we may touch on child abuse and suicide, which I appreciate will be distressing for some listeners. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Judy King, author of AGNES, A Childhood Betrayed and Reclaimed. A true story. In fact, AGNES is Judy's story. Judy made her fortune renovating homes in Sydney's Paddington in the 1960s when Paddington was just a working-class suburb on the cusp of gentrification. She left Sydney in 1969. Just to put that into perspective, that was the year Armstrong stepped onto the moon. And in so doing, escaping a demanding mother and led an intrepid life in Asia and Europe, eventually settling in the UK and, as Judy has already said, now in Mallorca in Spain, where she established herself as a successful sculptor. However, in the background, Judy was suppressing a traumatic childhood, punctuated with sexual abuse, abandonment, emotional deprivation, and a raft of family secrets. In speaking with Judy and talking about what led her to writing AGNES, you'll hear Judy's determination and in confronting a repressed past, which is a testament to her enduring strength. Judy King, welcome to the Power of Women podcast.
Thank you, Di. I'm really pleased to be here. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Judy, you became a successful real estate agent and entrepreneur in the 1960s, which you and I have talked about off camera previously. And that was a time when very few women were breaking into those industries. Tell us about that.
Yes, I did. I did become successful in real estate in my 20s. I never tried to work in real estate. It started in an upmarket restaurant where my architect boyfriend was trying to sell his project to a developer. I was there purely for the female allure.
The sizzle.
Exactly. Halfway through the evening, I felt a tap on the shoulder and turned around to see a little guy with a red face and puffed out chest grinning at me as he pronounced in this really loud voice, "I'd like you to work for me." As my head swung in a definite no, architect boyfriend nudged me in the ribs and whispered, "Say yes, it's a great chance." The following day, I was behind the desk in Bill Bridges' real estate office in Queen Street, Wallara. Soon, I developed a charm I didn't know I had and was selling houses like there was no tomorrow. With my commissions piling up, I convinced Bill to let me keep the office open all weekend. I love working weekends as I had a break from the boss's groping hand. I soon realized that the big money was being made in the office out the back, where Bill and his partners negotiated the purchase of rows of tenanted Paddington terrace houses.
What was the price of a property in Paddington in those days, Judy?
I absolutely can't remember at this stage, because also we were still in pounds. They would buy, Bill and his partners, he had a lot of these pinstriped upper class men.
Suit types.
No, they were involved with him. But what they do is they buy the rows of terrace houses, and then they buy out the tenants and give them a lick of paint, and then sell them on individually in the front office. So as time went on, I went weary of my sexual rejection. Bill kept his hand in his pocket. We developed a kind of friendship. It was kind of really strange to have this friendship with this very, very strange. He even started to seek my opinion as I accompanied him in the car, sussing out potential new deals. Then one day, I took a deep breath, and I'm telling you, a really deep breath. Propose we do a deal together.
How old were you when you said that?
I was 22.
Oh, good heavens.
Or something. And he said, well, he found my boldness. He found my boldness amusing. He just loved teasing me. And he used to say things like, oh, I just went past the bank and the windows are open. You better get down there. Stuff like this.
That's the little bit gangster that you're touching on.
He said, yes, well, I said, can we do a deal together? And he said, yes. He'd put up the money and give me half the profit. But you'll never find a deal where we can make 100%. So I doubt it.
So he only offered you 50%, comfortable in the knowledge that he thought you weren't going to be able to pull this deal off.
There you go. And so the pressure was on.
The challenge was on.
Obsessively, I scouted around Paddington. I mean, until finally I went in all these little back streets, asking people. I knew the guy in the butcher shop. He used to give me a lot of tips. A lot of the people around just found my boldness somehow amusing, and they all tried to help me. And so there it was, waiting in Sutherland Street, Paddington. I remember I was still seeing that house. So we used my solicitor. I didn't trust Bill, so
wise move.
And ended up with £1,000. Well, £1,000 in those days was a lot of money.
A lot of money.
So after that, I enrolled in the real estate course and managed to get a license. How I did all this, I still is beyond me. And I turned an old butcher shop on the corner of Jersey Road and Paddington Street into a real estate office, from where I also dealt in property. The truth is, I just fell in love with Paddington. It was like a huge, big new home, showering all this wonder into my hands. I can still close my eyes and walk the streets. I know them so well.
So where do you think your entrepreneurial spirit came from? Because this was untapped potential and you dipped into it at a very young age.
I saved my life growing up in this really dysfunctional household by being a problem solver. So it was a survival thing, really. A bit like Scheherazade, you can tell your stories. So I was, my mother would come to me for solutions to problems, So I quickly would think, hold on, now let's think about this, But I was the whole time, it was how I made my mark, if you like. Apart from doing all her chores and everything else. I mean, in a sense, my mother remained the child and I was the adult, really.
Mm. And isn't that an interesting thing? Because the fact that your childhood wasn't necessarily it was less than ideal, and it was difficult. You developed a whole lot of skills that perhaps some of the modern generation are missing out on because everything's too easy.
My life was basic survival, so you can see how you can see what an impulse that was to survive. But also, when I came to real estate at 16, I knew what it was like to be abandoned, poor, cold, and hungry. And so, like Charlotte O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, I said, it's never going to happen to me again. So it's very, very basic stuff,
Yeah, so true survival stuff. However, you clearly had a mind for business and numbers and the art of the deal. So, for all of the other hardships, you still clearly had those innate skills somewhere within you that you were able to draw upon.
Well, something I did have was that I was just interested in the main chance. I wasn't interested. I mean, we used to go to the King's Cross. I used to go with Bill. And there was this big swimming pool, and there'd be all these developers there and all these dolly birds around the pool in their bikinis. And here's me in my sensible dress with all the documents and papers under my arm, just looking straight ahead.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
what a time.
It was very much that I was motivated to manage the guys, and how I did it, I don't know, but I just swerved around and went around another corner. And, I mean, it wasn't easy.
Did you ever stay in touch with Bill after all of this played out?
Bill's no longer with us, but I did see him one day when I went back to Australia. And I retained a kind of fondness for him, but he was often in difficulties, mainly because he was shady, He was a shady character. There's no two ways about it. And he was loud-mouthed. I mean, he would drive up to the office, and from the car of the office, he'd scream into the people from the car. He did everything from the car window. He ran his real estate office.
Before phones were ever invented, he was using a megaphone from the car.
He had a megaphone in his throat. A permanent megaphone he had in his throat. So anyway, that's what I did. I opened my office and...
Still in your 20s when you opened your business, yeah?
Yeah, I was, yes.
Unbelievable.
It was only, I just was walking a path of gold, really, when you think about it. It was very difficult in the beginning to manage because I'm dyslexic. I couldn't. I think you mentioned that about how it was to be dyslexic, and so I'd always covered that up. I mean, I just like all of these. I had all these subterfuges of ways of covering up, but. When I had my office, I put an ad in the newspaper for a retired bank manager. And so I came into the office the following morning and I couldn't believe it. Here were all these retired men. It was heartbreaking. And I felt, such an upstart interviewing these retired.
This was for your finance, to do the finance for the business, was it?
Yes, I did. I got the idea. Well, if I get, because I used to see all those retired people around, I thought, well, and so I was really lucky to choose to get this guy very quickly, and he ran the finances in the office, and he was devoted, and he was almost like a father figure. He was a very decent, and he was an ex-bank manager. And then I got a receptionist, and now I'm choosing people completely unlike my family. That was funny, but I knew to choose. So I got this girl who was a card-carrying communist called Cheryl. So I thought, well, she always had my back. She looked after me, and soon I started employing people. So I ended up with 3 salespeople. I had a girl called Judy Harper, and then 2 guys, and we were bouncing along.
Really incredible, and your resourcing strategy was a genius one, saying, make use of the retired bank managers and tap into all of their knowledge and help identify clients and how to get bank loans and all of the flow-on effect of purchasing a house. So it was very clever.
Well, I hadn't thought that far along.
Well, maybe somewhere in the back of your mind you had. Because, that was a stroke of genius, just quietly.
Well, that was the thing. I got ideas, and I was a problem solver, even in the real estate business. And, of course, I had nothing to lose. So it often happened that there'd be a property, for instance, there'd be an owner and a tenant in conflict for years. And so I had nothing to lose. I can remember once in Ormond Street, there was this tremendous conflict between owner and tenant. And I said to the tenant, well, listen, forget about the angst that you've had all those years. What I'll do is I'll give you the money to buy it, and then we'll have another contract, and I'll buy it off you straight away. So I'll be the middleman. So he said, oh, what a good idea. I said, you won't have anything to do with him. I'll set it all up. So
problem solving 101 was your skill.
Yeah, I just came up with ideas of how to, but it also had to do with the fact that I had nothing to lose. Nothing to lose.
You know the saying, the most dangerous person in the room is the person with nothing to lose. So you left Australia then in 1969. How old were you at that point?
28, 29, 28. What happened is that when my father died, I just lost interest in the business. So he suddenly died at 49 of a staphylococcal infection. His throat closed up, and my mother drove him to the hospital in Liverpool. But the only thing that would have saved him would have been a tracheotomy. And my brother, who was in the back of the car, was trying to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So he was dead when he arrived at Liverpool Hospital. And so after that, I suppose in the deep, I'd always been trying to, by being successful in business, I'd been trying to win his love, his attention. And so that was all over, baby blue. No more.
The drive to do that was no longer there.
I can remember thinking, I don't want to get out of bed. I can't go there anymore. So he was obviously the impulse to to make a relationship with him, which I never, in retrospect, I never would have made. And not only that, he wasn't someone to admire on any level, really. But of course, I was always trying to save him. I mean,
you were playing the parent to both mother and father in your childhood, yes.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely how it was. I mean, he was a drinker, so I thought, well, I'll take the pioneering at school, the Catholic school I was at. I'll take the oath, the pioneering oath, not to drink for life, so that'll help him get off the drink. Yeah, so I mean, I was.
Has that lasted, Judy?
No.
No.
It lasted for a short, well, it lasted for that time I was in school and everything. But I mean, I never jumped, unlike a lot of people who've had alcoholic parents.
You didn't follow that?
No, I was, yeah, I mean, I was very aware of the horrible sensation of having a hangover, and that kept me abstemious. Well, I enjoy a glass of wine. I look forward to it all day. But it's just one glass of red wine.
Well, Judy, coming up, we're going to talk about the earlier years, and again, I'm going to remind listeners that some of that might invoke some triggers in others, because some of this is going to get a little bit heavy. So, Judy, back in just a moment. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to jump on to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. Can I ask, you told me when we spoke in the precursor to today, how old are you now? 83.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think you're doing bloody well.
Well, to tell you the truth, this is the best time of my life, and mercifully, apart from an eye and a knee,
You're doing okay.
Yeah, exactly. I just hope I have a few more years to be in this nice space that I arrived at with great difficulty.
Well, your level of enthusiasm and energy and your curiosity still to learn new things is absolutely brilliant. So
I found this psychiatrist. And that's how it all came about, really. It was a tip. A woman at the bank one day just gave me his number and phone number and contact. He said, well, it's rather late in the day, because this was already, I was 60, in my early 60s. He said, well, it's harder to change as you get older, which is understandable. But he said, we'll give it a go. And so really, what I did was I actually made that my next that was a complete project. So I moved out of Dea, which was the village I'd lived in, which is a bit of a fishbowl, small place. Everybody knows your business. So I moved into a house in a town, which is where I am now, in Soye. And so I became a recluse and just focused on why was it that in many ways I was clever in making a living and other things, but why was it that I ended up having a nervous breakdown after each of my marriages and ended up badly out of pocket? I mean, most of all my emotional relationships were in that frame. I just completely became the servant. I can't think of another way of putting it. And so I decided that no more relationships. it's time to figure out
what's going on.
What was the problem? What's behind all that, you know? So, with the therapy, I just became a bit like a nun, you know, in a convent. I became a recluse, and I would go to the therapy, and also my psychiatrist could draw on 5,000 years of knowledge, and I was very impressed by that. You know, he could bring history into our sessions with such ease, and I thought, I'm going to educate myself as well. So it was a period, well, that was my project, and my whole life was centered on now solving my own problem.
Yeah. And is that what really peeled the onion to what was this dysfunctional childhood? Was that what lifted the lid on it?
Yeah, well, what happens is, I mean, you can't think your way out of, you can't find a solution just by thinking. It was by actually changing behavior, really. And part of being in therapy was that he would steer me away from going back to the old attractions of people against myself. So, I mean, so bit by bit, when I was going off the path, he would just steer me back and say, do you think you really need that? Or do you, subtly, very subtly, he would do that. And then slowly I would have I'd had insights into myself. So it was like a little space occurred in what had been a closed area within me of quickly blocking out the past as I moved into the moment in the future or the present. So that was those slow insights that let me see myself in action and let me see other people's behavior to me. So I was starting to move into reality in terms of being with other people. And the greatest danger was dependence. To become dependent, because that's what had happened to me in childhood. I mean, it's like the worst relationships you make with other people are the hardest to get rid of, you know. Good relationships can understandably be either solved or changed or parted. But because it's toxic. It was a toxic relationship.
And is that how you viewed the mistakes in your marriages, in your life partners?
Yeah, I could see it. Wow. I could look back then and see that in my relationships, I was concerned for the well-being of us both, and they were just concerned for themselves.
For them. You wouldn't be the only one who's found themselves in that situation.
Well, yes, I don't think you have to be screwed up psychologically to end up. In my case, it was very extreme, and I was deeply traumatized, which meant I became weaker and weaker, you know, in the relationship. So I just became weaker and weaker. And in fact, I left Australia at the end of my real estate. I sold the business and left to travel with my future husband. My first husband was called Rick, and he was an architect. I was always attracted to architects because I loved design and stuff. Well, he just happened, a good-looking guy, walked into my office after my father died, and he was also, and I was trying to escape my mother, and I'd always wanted to travel. So he also was trying to escape his mother. So I sold a house. He had a waterfront house in Balmain, that he had with his mother as a way of helping him split with his mother.
That was your intervention.
Exactly. And so I sold it to Barry Stern, who I used to have a gallery in Paddington. And he bought it with his boyfriend, and they had it, all these peacocks strutting around in the waterfront. But so then we set off, as you know, to travel. We went to, firstly we went to Bali, and then we became entranced with Donald Friend. He was a painter, an artist, Sydney artist, long ago, and he tried to persuade us to build a house on a block of land next to him in Kuta Beach. But when it came down to it, we would have needed to have an Indonesian partner. So we finished the idea, we said goodbye and moved on. So we traveled up through Southeast Asia, Cambodia, which was fantastic, before the Khmer Rouge. I'm really going back in time. And Japan, Hawaii, and then we went on to San Francisco, and we drove the Big Sur together down to LA. And then after a month in Mexico, we flew to New Orleans for the Mardi Gras.
You lived large, Judy.
Well, it was spending time. So on to London, and then we got married at Chelsea Registry Office, got a flat, and we got jobs. And I divided my time between working in an antique shop in King's Road, selling old scientific instruments. It was a wonderful time there.
King's Road was a fantastic spot at that time.
Yeah, it was so exciting. And then I went to an art school at Lambeth, inspired by all my the Paddington painters I'd known. I went to an art school, and but then we actually, John Olsen and some of the Paddington painters of that time, they was spending their grant money in a little village in Mallorca called Dea. And so one Christmas we went there to meet them. And we fell in love with that little place, you know. Robert Graves, this famous poet, and he wrote I, Claudius, and Claudius the God. Mm. He was living there, and so it attracted a lot of artists from all over the world, because it's very cheap cost of living as well.
Mm. And warm.
Yeah, there you go. And so we ended up renting a house for the summer there. And once we got there, we bought a house in Dea. And then we stayed for 2 years. And Rick, who I was married to, he changed the architecture for painting. He became a painter, inspired by all these people we met there who were artists. So then after I returned to Australia, on the strength of the work I'd done in London, I was accepted at the Sydney College of the Art, it's called now, but then it was called East Sydney Tech, and it was the old prison barracks in Darlinghurst. I don't know if you know that.
I do know where. Yeah. Yep.
And so that was just a joy to go in there every day. And some of the people I'd known were teachers there, you know.
And that was the beginning of your sculpting career, was it?
Yes, exactly. So I was there. I had 2 wonderful years there. But husband Rick, who I was always not deciding to stay in Australia, and support me, he decided he'd go back to Dea, to the house we have, and paint. So there I was supporting him in Dea while I still did real estate and went to art school. I wasn't unhappy, actually, because it meant that I could devote all my time to learning about ceramics, which was a thrill. But when I finished the course, there was a recession in Sydney, so I had to tell him, you have to come back. I can't go on sending the checks any longer. So he came back, and then we set up studios south of Sydney at a place called Foxground in the rainforest area, south of Kiama, if you know that area. I don't know.
I know Kiama.
Yeah, so we were right up in the mountain in Kiama. We built a house there and made these beautiful studios. And it was there that I became pregnant, and not long after I gave birth to our son, the marriage broke up because Rick had an affair with this woman who ran a classical musical program on the ABC. She'd been rather crudely dumped by her boyfriend and started coming down on the weekends, and so that was what happened. The affair didn't last all that long. He actually went flying back to Dea, the house in Mallorca, to escape her, and so...
Sounds like you were still financially supporting Rick, Judy.
Well, I never saw it like that because it's the way I'd always lived, and so anyway, I promised that I'd stay behind, as usual, and sell up the house, and I joined him in Mallorca. But then what happened was that I'm living right in the top of this mountain in the rainforest with a 4-wheel drive car and a generator for the electricity, no power. And so I have a baby and a dog, and the dog wanted to get in the baby's basket in the back of the 4-wheel. It was really the hardship like you can't believe. I mean, I finally got people to come and help me and stuff. But so I said to Rick, I packed up, once I sold the house, I packed up all our possessions, had these shippers come and pack them all off. And then I never made the reconciliation in Mallorca. Instead, I ended up in Kandy, Sri Lanka, where I found a lot of kindness. I was desperate for kindness. And then I became, I had 2 servants. I had this lovely house in Kandy. It's a beautiful place in Sri Lanka, up in the mountains. And not only did I find kindness, but I found Buddhism. So I would have my lunch with the monks before 12, and then I learned to meditate. And so all of this was really, I think, what saved my life. And I fortunately had enough money to finance. I was there for 2 years, and they were, again, 2 wonderful years that I had with all these new discoveries, especially the Buddhism. I mean, it was very helpful, the idea of things rise and fall away, the philosophy of Buddhism. But unfortunately, the Civil War was looming, and so I had to leave. It was just too dangerous, especially for one of our servants who was a Tamil. So we had to hide him in the basement, So after that, I went back. I went to Mallorca, following all my things, which I lost, of course, and I lost the house after taking 2 years to get there. But I wasn't for reconciliation. I would lose the house in the divorce. So I bought a new house in there with the help of friends, and I brought my son up there.
So when did you come back and face into what was this incredibly challenging childhood and face into what you had experienced as a young girl?
Well, it was 2000. It was in 2006. I was already in therapy, so I came back and I got an apartment in the Grantham in Potts Point. And I remember it was the first time I wasn't staying with friends. I was on my own as kind of like an investigative journalist on my own behalf.
Investigating your own life.
Exactly. That's what. So I had this fabulous view in front of the Opera House and looking down on Woolloomooloo and the Harbour Bridge, and that was kind of like a security somehow.
Well, it's a good view.
It's a good view, and it was also going back to the past, what I knew, the visions of the place you grow up in stay with you forever.
So was your childhood issues repressed at this stage, or
Yes.
were you dealing with those?
I had amnesia about my childhood. I couldn't remember. And so it was by going back to, particularly, I was going to see my aunt, who treated me extremely badly when I went to live with them in Maroubra as a young 16-year-old. But I was still unaware of that. I mean, I knew that she treated me badly, but it wasn't strongly in my consciousness. So I just by chance stopped at Gordon Station and got off the train, and it was there that the first memory of the past that I no longer had came back. I just happened in that street to meet this old lady who'd she'd been there since she got married, and so she knew everything. And I was standing in front of the house where, as a child, after a big storm, she told me all this, you see. She said, well, I was standing in front of the house we used to live in, and she said, well, do you remember the electrocution? And I said, no, I don't. And she said, well, but then I thought, I do. I started to remember as she told me that an overhead cable had come down and had fallen in our garden. And my mother had, being lazy as she was, and she hadn't notified the authorities. And so this cable was there, and we were children all around this cable. And this boy I knew, he came up to the cable and he was holding my hand and he picked it up and he was immediately electrocuted.
And you were, because you were holding on to him?
I was wearing gumboots and I immediately, with the current, was flying back. So that was the first huge memory. Because my parents had always blamed me because of the backlash from all of this. They blamed me because that I brought that boy to our house because he was my friend. So this was a huge memory that came back that was earth-shattering. And then I thought, that's why I've always been so afraid of electricity. But I started then, that was I'd entered another space. And then I started to have a different attitude. I no longer wanted to prove myself to my aunts. And, I started to, it's a huge change point. And so then other things, I started to remember other things, and then back with the psychiatrist, we started to talk about, he started to interpret what the various things that had happened to me along the way, why that had affected me in the way it had emotionally. So that's how it came about.
Wow. And facing into the childhood trauma that you've experienced, how has that manifested itself in really how you deal with your life today?
Now, I thanked my psychiatrist not long ago again, because I still go to him. And one of the reasons that keeps me here. And when I thanked him, he said, "You don't have to thank me. You did it all yourself." And it was then that I knew I had the right person. So it's now that I no longer am attracted to people against myself. He's telling me, he could have said, "Oh yes, I've worked so hard with you and da-da-da." But instead of that, as a true professional and a good person, a decent person, he's telling the truth. I just guided you along the path. You did the work, And so I no longer had to apologize for myself. So there I was, sitting there in front of the other people without saying, "Oh dear, I'm so sorry about." I was forever apologizing for myself, and now I can lie in bed and go back into to see myself in the past, and
without it being traumatic.
I don't feel shame or fear. And that's the thing, I didn't want to go in. I never went into the past. I blocked it out as I went along, which is what stopped me learning. It kept me innocent and immature, And so, I cringe to think of how I behaved, especially in emotional relationships. But I can forgive myself.
As a result of your circumstances, which, as we said in the beginning, were punctuated with all sorts of atrocities that a young child shouldn't have to deal with.
Well, sexual abuse. I was abused by my father and my uncle, and so that is terrible. And they made out that I was this flirt, and I was misrepresented as a way of them blaming me for their abusive behavior. I suppose I'm not au fait in the absolute Freudian analysis of these things, but finally, once I understood their motivation for their behavior subsequent to me, and also my mother and aunts were jealous of their husbands,
giving you the attention.
Yeah, and they were so cruel to a 16-year-old girl. At 16, this is a very, very bad period of my life. And then I got pregnant too, and went to a home in St. Anthony's Home in Croydon to have this child that was adopted out. And again, I did it on my own because I didn't want to marry the guy who was abusive like they'd all been. And so that was what happened.
Mm. Well, you have made such an extraordinary fist of your life out of what was an incredibly difficult yet suppressed past that has only come to light in the latter part of your years.
Yes, true.
I mean, amazing. What is still, you're 83 now, Judy. What is still on your bucket list of things to do?
Well, I just find life so fascinating. I mean, I just love learning. And so it's just, I love reading. And before, I was so blocked up in my brain with all of this stuff from the past. It was like having a huge garbage heap in my head, you know. Now I can actually, I can take in the sense of what I'm reading, absolutely. And so my intellectual development has been extremely exciting. I mean, I just love to learn more about the world, and I love to be in the world. I mean, I just love to. Now I can just sit and look at my lemon tree and think, oh my God, how did this all happen? And I eventually made it here to just be able to look at your beautiful the lemons there without thinking, I should have said this, or he should have said that, or why did I do? You know, I've got this clear mind for the first time in my life.
Well, I feel like we've had a real walk through what is an incredible life's journey today. Thank you, Judy. And I know that much of that is going to be in the book, Agnes.
It's all in the book. I'm just telling you snippets from the book, which is much more linear in terms of dates and years and things. But yeah, I mean, that book has been incredibly cathartic. It was my psychiatrist's idea to write, and I said, oh, I can't do that. But always I started with, I can't do that. And but bit by bit, I managed, and not only that, when I sent that manuscript to the literary consultancy in London for an assessment, and I was so thrilled that I got this incredibly favourable assessment from an editor there who asked them if she could deal with me direct. And so I had this really, really very enjoyable time with her, because I said, I don't want to rush. I'm not in this world. All of this is a huge surprise that you're interested in editing this book, but let's just do it slowly. And then I had the thrill of Debbie
of Ginandera Press wanting to publish it.
Well, she just inherited the Ginandera Press, and so that was fantastic that she decided to include it in her portfolio of books. Well, I think I was one of the very early ones from when she took over. And then after 17 years, to return to Australia for the launch of the book, that was the biggest thrill of my life. It was really so fantastic in Birkeloff Bookshop with all these old friends from the past. And it was really, really a joyous event to have that.
Well done. Well, it's been a joyous event having you on the Power of Women podcast, Judy, because your story is extraordinary. You were an entrepreneur in an industry that was male-dominated years before your time, and you were a successful entrepreneur in your very early 20s, opening your own business and employing a raft of interesting employees through a very interesting resourcing strategy. And it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you from Mallorca today. And I know that this episode will be well listened to, and you will absolutely inspire many generations with your courage.
Well, I hope I've managed to articulate everything clearly. It's a lot. When you've lived 83 years, you've got a lot to talk about.